Chapter 42. Kenan's Song of the 10 Columns. When Seth had made this brief remark about the lack of love, Kenan, Mahalaleel, and Jared, who greeted them lovingly and thanked me for the grace of meeting again, joined the three. Seth blessed them all in my name, to enable them to speak in the face of my love, and also in the presence of Seth, the second in the highly blessed line of Adam, which finally I myself completed corporeally in the great time of times. When these three had received the blessing, Kenan was the first to speak. Dear fathers and children, hear and listen carefully to my words, for I will tell you faithfully what I saw in a vision at night. In this vision I was shown 10 columns towering over great water, which often mightily lapped against them. On the first column Adam was standing and speaking to the waves. Listen, children, God, the Lord Sabaoth, the mighty, great and holy Father of all the children begotten by me, is the only God. As he has made me an only man of the earth, he is from eternity the only God, and besides him there does not exist any other God. For infinity is from eternity to eternity filled completely with his glory, holiness, and love. Therefore, you waves shall believe that the Lord is the only great, eternal, almighty, holy, just, exceedingly wise, most loving, gracious, merciful, supremely good and sublime God, and thus our Father. So be calm, you brisk waves, and become clear that the light of this only God may shine through you right to the foundation of your life. Amen. And behold, the waves around the column of Adam became calm, and a mighty light shone from God's heights upon the smooth mirror of the water's surface. Whereupon the surface shone like a sun, and from the bottom of the waters rose a solo song of praise, floating from the waters like a luminous cloud, rising with increasing radiance towards the eternal, holy heights of the Almighty Father, the one only God. And hear further, dear fathers and children, what I have seen in my vision at night, not with the eyes of my body though, but I saw this enraptured with my spiritual eyes. Not far from the column of Adam stood a similar one, almost as stately. The brisk waves hesitated to lift their sparkling heads up to the stately column, and were gently swinging, full of reverence, around this noble column, as if to say, Look, mortal man, see the name of the Most High, who, holy and loving, is called Jehovah. This name shall never be uttered in vain by base tongues. The Holy Father's name is holy, most holy. O men, O children, the circling waves were calling. Oh, do bear in mind whose name it is. Consider in your hearts that it is a God who has this name. And behold, only when I had in amazement heard this from the gently moving waves, could I timidly raise the Spirit's amazed vision to the top of the column, and I saw, oh, I cannot describe how warm and delighted I felt. I saw, standing on the shining top of the column, with an earnest mien, you, dear Father Seth. And you spoke to the gently circling waves what I have just told you, for I believed to have heard from all the circling waves what you spoke from the holy height to the waves gently tossing around the column. This I saw exactly as I have told you. Now hear further, you dearest fathers, and also you always obedient children. Not far from the column of Seth, surrounded by shining waves, I saw the third of the columns. It was standing there, bathed in reddish light, more sublime than all the others. And all the waves, which more and more briskly kept tossing around the other columns, were here standing still, and from their gently vibrating furrows steamed, full of reverence and love, a fiery song of praise to the Lord and eternal Holy Father. I wanted to investigate in what direction the fiery vapours were going. And behold, my eyes, almost blinded by the glory of exalted songs issuing like steam from the calm of the pure waters, discovered in the holy height of the third column, surrounded by shining clouds, the third of you, dear fathers, who was Enos. You, Enos, were standing on the third column, speaking to the quietly listening waves with fiery words. Oh, listen, all you waters of the earth. Hear the words from the height, and listen to the sounds of the holy speech. For 6 days and nights you may move and toss in merry ripples. But when the 7th day has come, blessed with holy rest, the Lord's Sabbath, a holy day, mind you, this day you must always celebrate as you owe it to the Holy Father to praise and glorify Him. For it is in accordance with eternal order that all that has the living breath out of God, and in a loving, thinking heart, feels the eternal Holy Father's love, shall observe the rest and celebration of the holy day. This is always the Holy Father's most holy will. For 6 days all the waters may work, flow and toss. But on the holy Sabbath there shall be holy rest, wafting like fiery clouds loftily above the silent, listening waters, inviting them to the celebration. Listen, you dearest fathers and obedient children, to what I have here told you, faithfully and exactly as I have heard it. And continue to listen patiently, beloved fathers, and also you children who love us. What wonders of divine love and shining grace I have furthermore faithfully seen with amazed eyes of the Spirit. O fathers and children, as you are seeing and hearing me in my zeal telling you of my visions, truly, there I was standing in this vision, bathed in the reddish light, as the fourth on an only little less stately column, which was like the first 3, radiantly surrounded in all directions by the brisk circling waves. Amazed at this so suddenly exalted position which I occupied much like the fathers, I noticed with sadness that further and further away from the column, the waves kept getting darker and more turbulent, and in countless places in burning zeal lifted restlessly their foaming heads, like smoking mountains high above the column on which I was standing, full of sorrow and anxiety, as if they were disobedient, naughty children endeavouring to overturn the column of both the Father and the Mother, abusing it in its fall with blaspheming tongues, and stamping it with their feet, to which masses of smothering dust of the blackest ingratitude were sticking. When I had looked at this for a while with a bleeding heart, there suddenly arose out of the column a mighty storm, raging like hurricanes over the foaming heads of the rising waves. And behold, this mighty storm, issuing from the column, had not lasted long when the raging waves, impelled by the punishing force of the hurricanes, settled to a blessing calm, only here and there not unpleasantly interrupted by an occasional soft murmuring of the willingly levelling furrows on the vast water's surface, followed by a complete calm of the shining layers of the breath flowing from the divine mouth. And when the mighty love of the eternal Holy Father had, with such amazing means, faithfully achieved the complete blessing calm, a beautiful sound began to flow forth from my mouth, and it sounded like holy words streaming from the loving heart of the holy, eternal Father from the heights of the eternal light of lights, in the endless shining spheres, pouring in abundant shining streams powerfully and far across the endless, listening surface of the great waters. And, as I heard it, I faithfully tell you the meaning of the glorious sound of this divine voice. The meaning was beautifully and wondrously expressed in the following way. "Listen," spoke the holy voice, "you stormily inclined torrents. You owe obedience and love to the column of Canaan, you quivering waves, if you want to moisten for a long time the dead and solid clefts of the grieving earth. But woe betides the waves, which tend to rise and foam if they should ever rise above the shining column of Canaan. However high they might rise, I shall, through the eternal power of my wrath and burning anger, harden and solidify them to yawning mountains, for their temporal as well as spiritual eternal torment, in the burning pit of my eternal curse. But the quietly obedient waters shall soon, out of my mercy, temporarily and eternally enjoy the surging in the light of the eternal love of the Holy Father of Fathers, in blessed, brisk and happy floods, streaming towards the seas of eternal life. So rise above the holy, shining column of Canaan. This is the will of the eternal, Holy Father of Fathers, and Judge of the raging waves of the seas of life, in endless rows and fiery streams out of God. Look, most beloved fathers, and you loving children, I have seen this with my inner vision, exactly as I have told you faithfully and truly, full of wonder, and through the higher working of eternal love in God and out of God. And listen further what wonders of divine love I have seen with amazement so clearly, as if these unusual things were substantially standing before the keen, open eyes of my physical body. I was still standing on the shining column, and looking towards the fifth column. And how amazed I was at the newly unfolding wonder of the divine love of the eternal, Holy Father. The column was dark from its base to the top, and the waves surging around it with violent thrusts appeared like glowing iron, and seemed to furiously destroy each other. Death was rushing and raging through the glowing depths of the angry waters, and, seized by the glowing rage, wave upon wave solidified. I gazed into the nights of the rushing depths of death, and what I saw there, listen, the human tongue would become numb rather than describe the horror of the raging waves burning throughout with deadly anger. When I had long enough gazed at it with the opened eyes of the Spirit in the heart of the soul, I lifted my eyes with a heavy heart to the top of the dark column. And there I saw you, Jared, the son of my son Mahalalel's first blessed love, praying fervently to the eternal Holy Father for love, for the enraged waves pushing, strangling and murdering each other. And as you, my Jared, were praying like that, there suddenly rushed along the wide open heavens a great flood of merciful love down upon the foaming waves, which had been hardened by the heat of the deadly wrath. Oh, listen, Now the hardening surface of the deadly sea was rushing and raging anew, and the waves already solidified in death began to loosen once more from their embittered hardness, and flowed like brothers and sisters, softly surging, heaving, penetrating, and helping each other, contentedly into the arms and hearts newly warmed by eternal love. Then suddenly a flaming sword was by mighty hands tossed into the trembling hands of the praying Jared, who quickly seized it and, according to divine decree, swung it as far as he was able. Following this, I could clearly hear these words: "You earthly, faithless bustle of waves shall not ever dare to slay beings created as children of eternal love, for I am the Lord over life as well as death. Whoever will with an angry heart slay his brothers and sisters shall surely be punished forthwith with eternal death of spirit and soul. Therefore, let no one knock or beat or curse or murder or slay another, for I am the Lord and mighty God of life and temporal and eternal death. And listen and see, most beloved fathers, and also you, loving children, as I have now told you faithfully and truly, so it has happened from sign to sign and word to word. Having heard and clearly seen this, I looked towards the sixth column, where I saw, oh, listen, beloved fathers, and also you, loving children. Oh, the fearful tongue of Kenan before your searching eyes dreads to tell you of the horror which I, your Kenan, had to see take place at the sixth column. I saw the column surrounded by blood and horrible slime, and instead of the brisk waves circling around the former columns, here the most disgusting and incomparably sickening, abominable worms were crawling around. And listen, even the column, the splendid column, was, like none of the others, soiled from its base to the top with the blood of shame, of the vile, hideous worms. Often they were crawling even to the top, and masses upon masses were rising, so that no one could see there the glorious mark of the divine will. However far the eye of the Spirit could reach, it was unable to see anything but heaps upon heaps of these worms, squashing each other in their frightful eagerness, and then again combining to bigger worms, crawling over the others, wriggling and twisting towards the slime-covered column of Mahalalel, coiling around it right to the top. They wanted to deprive it of its divine form, by which the holy will of the eternal Holy Father is to be proclaimed to the peaceful waves of the great waters of life, in the endless sea of the holy love, in the eternal Holy Father's heart. But hear what then happened. Suddenly the glowing heavens resounded, the sun lost its light, and also the moon could no longer gently dispense its faithful shine, nor could the stars, for they were falling in countless numbers from the crimson glowing sky. And listen, when this had happened, countless dead from all the depths of the stinking slime began to wail and scream. Oh, cover us up, all you broken stars, that we may not ever see the face of Mahalalel, who has come in the name of the eternal angry God, as a scourge to punish us poor worms, who are clinging to the high and glorious column. When these cries had risen from the dark depths of death, the heavens burst, and from their opened cracks mighty streams of the divine fire were pouring upon Mahalalel's column. But Mahalalel, enlightened by the Spirit of the Lord, said, "Listen, you stinking waves in the shape of worms. The love of the Lord is eternal, holy, and pure. Therefore, you shall also not practice unchastely. The time has come for a holy fire from heaven to wash you stinking worms in the eternal fire of wrath. If you do not beforehand wash yourselves to become peaceful, brisk waves filled with the light of love and grace." 2nd October 1840. And when these forceful words had come from the fiery mouth of Mahalalel, under constant flashes of lightning and accompanying thunder, the heaps and masses of worms began to sink down, and, having reached the level ground, the hideous, sickening forms flowed like metal in the sparkling fire of the dark, powerful forge in initially still clouded, but gradually more and more clearing waves and peaceful currents. And here, thus order, glorious order, had been restored, and I eagerly let my eye rove to endless distances across the whitish surface of the great, now cleansed waters. Nowhere did I now see heaps and masses pushing each other, but only here and there darker waves were approaching the lighter ones, whereupon they themselves became lighter and lighter, and in the end even self-luminous. When I again looked towards the Mahalalel column, I saw that it had been washed of all the bloody shame, and was shining delightfully in a whitish light with pretty, shining waves playing around it. "Listen, Mahalalel, I saw you on your knees thanking the Lord, the Holy Father of the shining waves. And behold, each word of thanks to the Father of eternal love, coming from your trembling lips, floated upward to the eternal heights of the eternal, Holy Father, like a radiant sun. And listen, beloved fathers, and you loving children, I am now faithfully and truly reporting to you what I have seen and heard. Since you have now willingly perceived this in your hearts, let me, Kenan, tell you more about the nightly wonders of divine love and super-gloriously radiating grace of the eternal, Holy Father. Now listen. When I had sufficiently watched all this in the radiating light of grace, flowing from the eternal heights of the Holy God and Father of love, and from all the peaceful and shining waves, I suddenly caught sight of a red glowing 7th column. And Enoch, the godly, honest Enoch, was standing, or rather suspended, on this glowing column. The waves were surging maliciously around the column of Enoch, which was rising high into the flaming atmosphere. I had not long gazed in amazement at this strange sight with the eyes of the Spirit, when I began to notice that under the malicious waves, partially covered by the mud of the ground, there were foreign, stolen waters heinously fetid. They were the waters of love and grace, as well as waters of life and light, and all kinds of other waters. And all these countless waters were solidified, like transparent stones, held with glowing fetters of the infamous self-love. And behold, you fathers and children, how this loveless robbing and stealing took place. I shall tell you as I have seen it. Masses, driven by thievish zeal, were rising like pretty cloudlets from the maliciously surging surface of the great waters surrounding the column of Enoch in all directions. These cloudlets were floating far beyond the limits of their column's area, and, seeing calm surfaces in other areas of the great waters, they pounced on them with more than lightning speed, seized the peaceful waves with greedy haste, reduced them to vaporous mists, lifted them up and drove them with the speed of hurricanes into the sinister, muddy depths of their spiteful rabble. There they sunk the so maliciously robbed peaceful waters, pushed them down and compressed them with their stolen might to the hardest stones, and then, in a heinous way, covered them with mud and the dirt of lies out of shameful self-interest. However, this malicious and bad activity did not last long, for soon I saw Enoch becoming much more radiant than the sun, and scorching rays, flowing from Enoch's head in mighty streams, in a moment turned over and brightened all the muddy, thievish depths of the great waters inflamed with rapacity. As the burning rays flowing from the head of Enoch had just touched the surface of the malicious waters, these began to rush and roar. The endless surface was steaming, and, forced by the heat of the rays, returned under duress all the spitefully stolen and through self-love and greed in the muddy ground solidified foreign waters. The latter, in great numbers quickly wresting themselves from the dark and cloudy vapours of the spiteful currents down below, rose like fiery clouds up into the purer, shining atmosphere. And behold, as they were ascending from the depths of death, active winds streamed from the column of Enoch, and carried in whirling joy the newly released children carefully past the raging vapours of the spiteful waters, back into the loving, waiting arms of waters which had become ennobled through commandments given by divine grace. When this had taken place, thanks to the wonders of holy love from above, suddenly Enoch stretched out his hands powerfully and spoke with a commanding, forcible, thunderous voice. You spiteful, rapacious, thievish waves, hear right down into the depths of the muddy and dark places the will of the eternal, mighty God. Hear with a calm surface the mighty words of salvation, calling. Every drop is repeatedly counted in the heart of eternal love, and, thus, everyone belongs to itself and to eternal love. Therefore, let no one ever cruelly become prey to another. For woe betide the thief, the malicious robber, and murderer of the property of other purer waters and beings. Indeed, woe betides all the waves evilly loving only themselves. Note this: the malice of robbers and thieves will never surge in serene, furrowing circles, but it will, in rigid death, solidified to glowing stones of eternal curse, be thrown into the lowest depths of the earth by the deadly might of the commandment, now or one day for sure. You shall not rob and steal, says the mighty will of the eternal, holy God. Take note of this and heed it, you malicious waves. And listen, most beloved fathers, and you loving children. These were the final words Enoch thundered from the shining column, as the most glorious, eternal mark of the divine will. As these glorious words faded away to distant areas of the horrible, surging dark surfaces, foreign even to the eye of the spirit, I could clearly hear words rising from the depths. These words, directed upwards to the column, had the sound of obedience. Do cleanse us, you shining herald of the holy, eternal God's mighty will. so that we too may become pleasing to the radiant, holy eye of eternal love, like other waters. And here, thereupon, streaming from the shining column, powerful fiery winds began to blow, marvellously mixing the fire of eternal love in radiant abundance into the surging waves of the listening, endless surface. And the waves and currents were purified through this shining mildness, and they appeared as bright as the surface of the sun, and praised and glorified the Lord of grace, circling around the column shining brightly. And the holy echoes sounded harmoniously along the boundless spaces of the shining waves. This is exactly what I saw, and I have reported it to you faithfully. As you, most beloved fathers and loving children, have so patiently listened to me, Kenan, the spiritual speaker, do continue to hear what further wonders of divine love and grace I have faithfully seen. At a short distance I discovered a very smooth column, looking almost like gleaming metal. Surging around it was a sea of sand. From the distance I believed to see floods of water, but the closer this dusty flood was approaching, the clearer it became to me that it was not water which was here surging around the column, but dry sand, which was lifted and whirled around by the winds, thus giving to the searching eye of Kenan the false impression of heaving waters. Having watched this in annoyed amazement, and unable to discover even a drop of water anywhere, I lifted my eyes heavenward and implored the eternal, Holy Father of love for his grace, help, and wise counsel. But heaven remained silent, enveloped in whitish light, here and there with a faint reddish shimmer, and there was not the slightest sound from the more and more clouding, holy, eternal height of the eternal, Holy Father's abode, usually so willingly spreading love and graces. And behold, the deceptive waves of sand kept rising higher and higher, and understandably became denser and denser the higher they rose, so that not even the most glaring ray could penetrate through the dustily heaving masses of the deceptive sand to refresh the eye. But fortunately, the mischievous obscuring affair did not last long, for glad of heart I soon saw Methuselah standing on that column, which was surrounded by the dark sand, and he was armed with a two-edged flaming sword. He was blindfolded with a linen bandage, soiled with glittering dust, and his ears were plugged up with sticky resin. But look, suddenly there appeared, dazzling with heavenly brightness, a mighty eagle in fast flight. It flew around the head of Methuselah in ever smaller circles, loosened the blindfold from his eyes, and carefully picked the sticky resin from his ears. When thus Methuselah's senses were freed, the powerful bright eagle, in the distance still shining like a star, flew up to the holy heights of the heavens from where it had come. But Methuselah, the loyal and truthful, seized the two-edged flaming sword, swinging it in his threatening right hand in circles in all imaginable directions, like flashes of lightning. And while he was swinging it with zeal, flaming, shining tongues were detaching themselves from the flaming sword, like gleaming sparks from an intensely burning, resinous trunk of the timber growing in abundance at the foot of the mountains. The countless tongues were flying with the greatest possible speed in all directions across the endless dusty surface, causing, with the might of their fire, chaos on touching the deceptive sand. And it was not clear what good could come of this. With great expectations I watched this peculiar scene, how for quite a while the flaming tongues were mixing with the deceptive sand. Yet the long wished-for result was nothing but sand, which had already turned white from the burning heat. But look, in the middle of such longingly waiting wishes arose Methuselah, looking extremely stern, and he began to powerfully preach the most holy will of the Eternal, most holy Father, to the throughout glowing sand. The mighty words passionately flowing from Methuselah's mouth were pouring like great waters in broad streams, terribly rushing and raging, dragging the sand with them, like earlier the tongues, in all imaginable directions. And the rushing and raging uttered clearly audible, powerful words, indeed, words of the might and eternal greatness of the holiness of God. And here, you fathers and children, these were the words. You futile dust, hear the will of the holiness of God. You shall never perform a false, deceptive heaving, but you shall convert to flowing, purest water, and as such keep surging in eternally shining waves. For only through falsehood will you one day perish completely. And look, when this had been heard by the endless surface, tiny grains upon grains dissolved into pure drops, which in shining truth ran happily all together, joined to a boundless surface of the purest waters, and surged and furrowed thoroughly, happily praising the most holy name of the eternal God. They washed the still resisting, firmly sticking sand from Methuselah's column, praising it and circling around it in shining rows, after adorning with loving eagerness their light, shining, swinging and tossing heads with the light which abundantly flowed from the column. See and hear, worthy fathers, and you so dear children, what I have faithfully seen and heard with open ears, and am now reporting to you just as faithfully and truly. It is the truth, nothing but the truth, which is actually the delightful nature of love. Therefore, the lie comes to nothing like no other vice, for only the lie is the exact opposite to the eternal truth of the Father's love. And now, most beloved fathers and loving children, hear further about all the wonders I, your Kenan, have seen with amazed eyes. I felt as if I, together with the column on which I was standing, had been pushed farther and farther to distant regions of the other columns. And as had been the case earlier, it was now also, for I saw from my high position the 9th column. O fathers and children, how peculiar it looked there! From a boundless depth of the eternal nights, a terrible column, soiled by all kinds of dirty, glittering colours, rose to a height no longer discernible by the eye. No surging of waters or any dusty sand, nor any stirring and striving of any nameable beings could be seen. Only eternal nights silently surrounded this mottled endless 9th column. Seeing this terrible, endless and lifeless desert, I thought, whatever can this mean? For whom is this endless column standing here? And thus I kept pondering for quite a while, but notwithstanding all my futile thinking, Not the tiniest spark would lighten the eternal endless night around the endless mottled column. O fathers and children, I became frightened, for even the light of my column kept fading, so that I could hardly perceive that my feet were still standing on its faintly shimmering pinnacle. This sad experience made me fall down upon my face, and I began to pray with all my heart to the eternal Holy Father, and implore him not to let me perish here. When I had done this in all earnest, I suddenly heard an admonishing voice saying, "Kenan, lower your thinking with pure love into me, your Father and God, and you will soon see things with quite different eyes." So I immediately did what the holy voice bade me, without pondering at all on its loving sound. And as I was doing so with a heart full of love, the column which had appeared endless to me began to sink deeper and deeper into the abyss of the eternal night. This sinking had not lasted long, when a distant rushing of very great waters reached my keenly listening ears, a sound not unlike the thunderous rolling of the spheres. Before I could look around properly, O fathers and children, I already saw huge masses of the foaming torrents rushing down into the dark, endless spaces of the former eternal night around the mottled column. Soon I saw the sight of the former eternal night filled with still muddy but endlessly surging water. I also saw the end of the column, which had appeared endless to me, emerge from the eternal heights of the heavens and descend to the surging, muddy waters of the new waters of the shining pinnacle upon which, in shining glory, Lamech, Methuselah's young son, was standing as a delightful herald of the divine holy will. And when he, too, caught sight of me, he began to address the waters as follows: "O hear, you great waters, do not ever waste yourselves in your desires, for that which you possess in love and grace from above is your possession for eternal times, and abundantly sufficient for you. For more than one thing cannot occupy one and the same place. Therefore, do not ever seek to destroy yourselves through foreign desires, but surge and circle in your very own sphere for the praise and glory of the eternal Holy Father." And listen, when Lamech had spoken these wise words, the waters promptly surged and cleared themselves, penetrated by the eternal light of the divine will. But I, Kenan, have faithfully seen this, and as I have seen and heard it, I have now reported it to you faithfully and truly. 19th October 1840. And here, you beloved fathers and loving children, O do continue to hear patiently the end of my speech. Look with me, your Kenan, into the depth of the divine wrath and the grace shimmering faintly through the flames of wrath for the faithless peoples of the earth. Oh, hear and see all I had to hear and see in the darkest place where the 10th column was. All the former columns had more or less some light of their own. Even the 9th column was surrounded by a mottled colourful glitter. However, this one, the 10th in the order of columns, did not have even the faintest shimmering spot. It was so dark that I could only feel it, but not see it with even the keenest spiritual sight. Whether it was surrounded by surging water or sand or by a dark empty nothingness? All that was uncannily hidden to the exploring eye of the dreaming Keenan, because of the unbelievably dark black night around the 10th column. I waited and waited for a long time, and looked with a threefold impregnated keenness of my sight, whether some faint light could not be detected. But my efforts were futile, and even my ears could not hear the slightest lisping of a tender breeze. Oh, listen. Then I became frightened in this dark, forsaken peace, filled with eternal death. I was unable to pray or implore the eternal Father of love to quickly liberate me from this dismal night of death. For only now did I feel that not just my eyes and ears, but even my tongue was paralyzed and unable to speak. When I had to experience this on myself, suddenly a fierce flash of lightning shot from the bottomless depth of the eternal night up to the metallic-looking heights of the completely closed heaven. However, as lightning is usually followed by thunder, after this endless flash of lightning, there were not the slightest sign of thunder. And as it had been prior to the lightning, it was after it too. The densest night was spread out from one endlessness to the other, and I, your Keenan, began to long mightily for light and life. For truly, I tell you, I had become fed up with the endless night of death. O fathers and children, the night lasted a long time until, finally, a tiny starlet was appearing on the metallic heaven as the belated only trace of the flash of lightning which much earlier had shot up from the depth toward heaven. My eyes, blinded for such a long time, were now gazing steadily at this tiny, shimmering little dot. And as I was gazing at it in astonishment, something sounded clearly into my almost deaf ears. It was not words or human voices, nor a rushing or a roaring. This sound resembled the piping of shepherds when they were gathering the sheep of Abel around them, as was their custom, and when the sheep came hurrying along, gazing in astonishment at the caring shepherds with their heads turned heavenwards. Only the piping I heard clearly, but I did not see anything of the sheep of Abel. When I experienced this with my almost deadened senses, a word flashed like lightning through my soul, and this word, this sweet word, said, "Your tongue is released, Keenan. Now pray and implore the Father of light, love and life, for light, love and life for this column broken in death." Then I fell down and promptly began to pray and implore the Father of love and of all stirring life to give in his mercy a brightly shining little flame of grace from above, so that my eyes might behold the formidable magnitude and vast extent of dark death. And when I had for some time implored the Holy Father, suddenly a powerful voice called my name, saying, "Rise quickly and look into the great abysses of the darkest death." Here, at the spot of the 10th broken column, adultery is denoted, destroyed by which the lower half of love is lying spread out in the deepest abyss of death, whereas the upper half of grace is hanging on the endless, brazen arc of heaven, and will not descend to the broken pieces before the base of this column is cleansed of the dirt of the serpent. The ground is the earth, a sinful house, And the dirt of the serpent is the so attractive flesh of all the women from the city of Enoch in the lowlands. Therefore, woe betide the earth which has become saturated with the blood of the brothers, who because of the wanton women have cruelly murdered one another and saturated the earth with their blessed blood. Soon I will let great floods gush forth from heaven to destroy all flesh, because of the enticing flesh of the women, through which all the waters here surrounding the 10th column were consumed. Oh, do make a show, you splendid, enticing flesh of all the women, as the most insidious children of the dragon. Oh, make a show, you alluring food of worms from the pit, you stench on my honour. You bathe and wash yourselves daily in the best water prepared with all kinds of herbs and spices, rubbing the finest oils into your skin to make yourselves even more enticing, so that you may seduce the eternal Holy Father's children. An eternal curse shall be upon you. This say I, Jehovah, God the Almighty, the Eternal. Soon I will prepare for you a bath, which will serve you eternally for bathing and smearing yourselves to your heart's content. How this will happen, I will now show you, Kenan, in the light of the eternal Holy Father's grace. Therefore you shall rise on your now also quite darkened column, and look down to the lowlands where you will see what is going to happen soon. And here, you fathers and children, I promptly rose and gazed with great amazements into the depth of death. I saw numerous of our children leave the mountains, and happily hurry down to the daughters of men, to unite with them, and even beget children, strong sons and charming daughters. Then I saw the sons become cruel rulers, murdering and slaughtering the poor, helpless children of men, and streams of blood of the brothers and children of men were flowing. These streams of innocent blood were mightily crying aloft the brazen ark of heaven. Then heaven burst asunder, and from the shining breach emerged an angel flying with great speed to Lamech's love, and said, You shall now prepare the box of grace, Noah, as the Lord faithfully bade you do already quite a while ago, and take refuge in it with all the Lord bade you take. For behold, already the curse-laden earth is burning in countless places, ignited by the judging wrath of the eternal God. As you can see, the accusing blood has now mightily shaken the grace of heaven. Therefore, the Holy Father has resolved to wash the earth of this curse, and thereby to fertilize it for a better race, which will soon go forth from you, his Noah, the only one who has remained faithful. And behold, you beloved fathers and loving children, when the shining angel had in a hurry spoken thus to the love of Lamech, the brazen arcs of heaven suddenly burst asunder, and from the yawning chasms and fiery crevices were gushing forth enormous torrents of streaming water, as the eternal Holy Father's grace, to extinguish the fire and one day redeem the guilt on the sinful earth. When the floods began to fill the low places of the earth, I saw countless generations emerge from them and, lamenting, seek the heights of the mountains. I saw the most attractive women with the whitest bodies, the daughters of men, fearfully and exhausted with bleeding fingers, climb the most rugged crags, and thereon dizzy heights, stretch their bleeding hands towards the yawning cracks of the fiery heaven, and cry in desperation for comfort and help. But all their crying was in vain, and with the floods, which with ever-increasing force were gushing along the yawning, fiery clefts of the brazen heaven, Fiery whirling winds pushed with great force the most tender human children, burning and singeing them from the so laboriously climbed crags of the mountains down into the raging torrents as a lamenting food of death. The fiery winds, as soon as they had here and there cruelly freed a crag of the mountains from the tenderest, whitest, and most attractive flesh, kept raging and calling with gruesome scorn, "So bathe and wash and smear yourselves, you infamous enticing food of the devil and his helpers. Adorn yourselves in the fragrant arms of eternal death, and receive the award for your untiring efforts, which caused all the generations of the earth to fall, beginning with Adam right to the last inhabitant of the curse-laden earth, and walk the deadly path of all the enticing flesh." Thus called the raging, fiery winds whenever they had freed one or the other sheltering crag of the laboriously climbed heights and ridges of the mountains. But this so ghastly killing and murdering of the sinful flesh of the voluptuous women, and of all the earthly sons and children of heaven, deceived and thus fallen through their seductive craftiness, did not last very long. For soon I saw vast waters surge and heave all over the highest mountain peaks. And except for me, no living being could be seen or any sound heard, except the surging of the waves of the newly formed great water against my faintly shining column. Through the 9 preceding cases, I was already used to seeing, as soon as the waters had filled the endless depths of death, a shining column rising nobly above the shining surface of the water. And if previously the column, as was the case with the 9th, was not immediately fully visible to the searching eye of Kenan, it still did not take long, and Lamech, emerged from heaven, was seen upon it laying down the law. But now none of the columns could be seen. I waited for a long time and was amazed when, instead of the column, I saw the box of grace swimming towards me on peaceful waters. And when it had reached the spot where I felt the dark column had presented itself to me, the blind seer, the raging waves receded, and the box of grace remained standing on a very tall, now softly shimmering column, which had risen from the waters. And now, when the shining box of grace was completely free from the heaving waters, a sparkling window in its roof was opened, from which soon some gentle doves were emerging and briskly flying away across the waters. However, the lively doves, flying to and fro, did not remain long above the waters as, except for the column of the box of grace, they did not find anything where they could, after a long flight, alight for a needed rest. And so they flew quickly back to the box of grace, searching for the sparkling window, and entered it. And when the sparkling window had once more been closed, violent fiery winds began to blow endlessly far in all directions across the to me infinite-seeming surface of the heaving great waters. Due to the violent fiery winds, masses of clouds were rising with lightning speed from the heaving surface. This mighty raging of the winds did not last long, and soon here and there high mountain peaks began to appear above the mirror of the water. Some of them were even becoming green, and soon resembled pretty gardens. When the searching, happy eye of Kenan was seeing this, the sparkling window in the roof of the box of grace opened again, and soon, once more, doves came out and briskly and with great speed flew towards the mountain peaks, which had already become green, circled them, and then alighted on freshly grown branches, where they stayed for quite a while. But then they returned to the waiting box of grace, loaded with sprouting twigs. And when this had taken place within a short time, the floods began quickly to recede, and mountains and delightful fields with fertile soil began miraculously soon to rise from the sinking surface of the waters, and became green, animated by the warming rays of the sun, turning into lovely meadows and gardens abounding with fruit. At the spot of the column, land was miraculously growing all around the column, rising higher and higher until the box of grace came to rest on the sprouting earth. And look, the window in the roof of the box of grace sparkled once more, and a large flight of lively doves flew out of it with great speed, and probably never returned to the open window in the roof of the box of grace. Then Noah, as the love of Lamech in the box of grace, saw that the waters had completely receded, and began to open its doors to let out all the saved animals, and gradually also his children and women. When with quaking hearts and trembling feet they had stepped upon the sprouting earth, they prostrated themselves, and in view of the shining open box of grace, thanked and praised the Lord as the only merciful Saviour from such a deserved judgment by the eternal, holy God's wrath. When they had done this for quite a long time, full of gratitude and love for the Holy Eternal Father, there appeared a shining angel bringing Noah a joyful message from the sublimely radiant heaven, around which a colourful bow was twining. And hear what the shining angel spoke. "Listen, Noah, you sole bond of my love. From you I will one day awaken the seed of life, which will powerfully rescue from death the countless prey it has swallowed, as I am sorry for the flesh down there under the now hardened floods of sin. Therefore, I will one day send a mighty Saviour, and never again punish the quaking earth with such judgments. The colourful rainbow shall at all times tell the peoples that until the end of time this will never happen to the earth again. But what will happen then is known only to me, the Eternal Father. And listen, you beloved fathers, and also you loving children. This is all I have seen and faithfully heard, and I have truly passed it on to you. You wisest fathers and children full of love may interpret it, for the meaning of such strange dreams out of God is hidden from me.